Hi, and welcome to Homo Dance, the channel history and board games. Even if we're not going to talk necessarily a lot about history today, because I have with me Pablo Clark, who's the designer and publisher and artist and everything of The Old King's Crown, which is a game that, even though this channel focuses on history, we've been talking about for a few years because you reached out, I think, a while ago. I got super excited about the game. I love line battlers and more complex games, and I think that your game was doing something interesting. Then I played it and I thought it was completely awesome. Like this very asymmetric, interesting feel, the way you use cars. I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff that was happening in that game. And you had your very successful Kickstarter campaign. And today we have some amazing reviewers like No Pun Included and Shut Up and Sit Down, who made
Yeah,
reviews of your games. You've been on the hotness on BGG for like number one for, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks or something like this. So
yeah, it
it's
was
been
2 weeks.
quite
Yeah,
crazy, and I wanted to take the opportunity, like we've been in contact for a while now, and I wanted to go through the whole process with you of how did you end up making a game like this. Maybe we can start by having you, Pablo, briefly introducing yourself, and then let's go through the story of the game, if that makes sense.
my name's Pablo, and I am the designer and illustrator on Old King's Crown, and I co-founded a little company with Andrew McKelvey and called Eerie Idol Games, and that's what we made. And so we've been working on the Old King's Crown for many years. In a way, maybe that's the historical part of this interview. We've just been working on it for so long that it now
It's
it's
almost a
like
piece of
it's
history.
like
Yeah.
ancient history. Yeah. So yeah, it's got a big timeline, and I come from an animation and video game background, and this is the first board game that I've designed, at least publicly. I've worked on a bunch of things behind the scenes, and yes, it's been a long road to get here, and it's just great for it to finally be there. And I think to work on something for so long, at least in my case, really inhibited, in our case at the company, really inhibited our ability to know exactly how people would receive it. And it is also a weird, complex, kind of thorny game that not everyone does get on with. But it's just been great seeing many people and people I'd really admire getting on with it. So yeah, lovely.
So you said you have a background in video games and animation, but when it comes to board game, did you come to the All King's Crown purely as a player, deciding I want to make a game, or did you have some experience in working in some aspects on board game design before trying to tackle such a large project? Because it is a big game, as you say, it's thorny, it's complex, like
Yeah.
it takes its roots in line battlers and some asymmetric games, but it's a pretty involved game. I was wondering, did you start off just with that, or did you build up your way towards making such a big game?
It was an incredibly organic process, partly because it took so long. So the game itself started really simply, and it's interesting. This is how why I had experience with board games. I was just very curious about them, but I hadn't actually played that many. I found the whole hobby really interesting because it felt like very DIY, even on in more commercial games, because it was all print and cardboard and so on. I didn't actually have that much experience with board games. For example, the core of the Old King's Crown is a line battler, a lane battler. I'd never played one. In fact, the first one I ever played was Omen, and that was years into the Old King's Crown development. I'd just never come across that kind of game. I had actually seen Omen on the small box website, but I never played it. I just thought it looked great, it looked really interesting, but I didn't know what it was about. And like sometimes Condottatori,
Ah,
I'm saying
Condottiere.
that, but
Yeah, yeah.
right, I haven't played that.
You haven't played Condottiere?
No,
Fuck's
I
sake,
mean,
Pablo. How can you
I,
come on this channel? It's one of my
I,
favorite games.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Everyone says that. Everyone like loves it. I just haven't played it. I used to pore over the manual, and not the manual of Condottieri, but the what I'm trying to say, the little advert pamphlet thing that came in old Fantasy
Mm.
Flight games. I was obsessed with this idea that it was like this little map, and there was cards, and I got the sense that it was like bluffing and numbers, which is how the Oaken correct. Maybe that's stuck in there. But no, I've never played it. I've heard really good things.
It's crazy
Um,
because your game does have a condottiere feel to it in some
mm,
ways, and it's insane to me that you haven't played it. But it's interesting that in a way you got inspired by the idea that you had in your
yeah,
mind of what condottiere could be, which I think is actually a way of inspiration, but maybe a freer inspiration, which I think is pretty cool. But so that means that All King Crown was your first board game design project. You didn't do anything before.
no,
Oh, that's crazy. But and very organically, it started from a very simple
yeah,
lane battler, and over time, you actually started to see design areas that you could actually enrich your game in, and it just evolved organically from there. And how,
exactly.
because you have always those things where when you're designing a game you have more and more ideas, and at some point it's starting to feel, oh my god, it's going in every direction, and it's
Mhm.
becoming really brittle and I have to narrow the focus again. How did you manage learning that process on your first project, of at the same time expanding on your ideas but keeping the focus of a coherent gameplay experience?
That's probably what people don't like the game would say that happened to the game, that it just sprawled out. But I think the system supports itself. It just happened very slowly and with a lot of freedom to fail, because there was no pressure, there was no time pressure, and there was no economic pressure at that time. So there was it was I was very free to kind of, and as the team grew, very free to just explore ideas and see what worked and what didn't. I think always what was interesting about it is because it had this really simple foundation, which I really like. I really like, now that I've done more designs and worked on this game for a long time, I really like just having very simple cores that are built on kind of almost like magical things. Like I think a deck of cards is like a magical thing. I think it's so,
I think it is, yeah.
yeah, I, I think it's so beautiful and so balanced, and also it suggests so many things. What are the numbered cards? What are the face cards? Does it suggest power, going up or down? Could that suggest something else? What do the different suits represent? And so on, right? And obviously, that it can produce, countless variations of numbers as well, combinations, which is amazing. So using that as a core allowed us to build out interesting substructures
Mm.
and see if they would support the weight. So the game at the start was 3 areas, and it was about supply lines like that. I was interested in this idea that you would fight over areas, but the important thing was to try and keep your cards available. And
Oh, okay.
so like that was at the heart of it. Like attrition was in it. That means that if you ever ran out of cards, you got punished. And then there was a court. Even then, it had like an abstract idea of like holding a court, and that would just gain you influence over time. So you already had these systems where you kind of had an economic part of it, which was that every round it would tick over so long as you were holding that area. And this was about trying to control your flow of cards. And from that, just how much richer could we make that? How much stress could we put the cards under? If the cards did one thing, which was fight, well, could they do 2 things? Like they could hold the court. Okay, that's interesting. And then if they were holding the court, could some cards be more expressive? Could some cards be better in the court? Could some cards confer bonuses in the court, and so on? And from there, just built out and built out, and a lot of learning as I went. I think it's really useful to be. It sounds like being naive is like a very, a naive is like it's got a negative connotation, but you see sometimes that naivety lets you do things that in the future you won't be able to do,
Hmm.
because you'll check yourself. You will stop yourself before you leap. You make these leaps because you will go, actually, I know X, Y, and Z, which is useful. Knowledge
Yeah.
is useful, but it stops you from making these leaps. And so, being naive, I could just kind of explore these ideas and go, oh, well, what if I do this, or what if I do that? And yeah, so very organic.
Hey, editing Fred here, just for a quick interlude. I just wanted to remind everyone that this channel is non-commercial, so no ads, no sponsors, just history and board games. So if you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you have a bit of spare change, feel free to donate on Coffee, and that will give you access to our awesome Discord server. Also, if you haven't been able to grab a copy of All King's Crown yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel Hop on Board, which is a really cool board game tutorial channel. I'll soon be doing a live stream over there with Pablo, where we're going to be playing the game, and there will be a giveaway of a few copies of All King's Crown. So keep an eye out for a video on their channel explaining how you can enter the raffle. And yeah, should be fun. So thanks, and back to the interview. During the process of the development of this game, it feels like you actually created a pretty active community on Discord of people who really got obsessed with the game, playing it over and over again. Did it become a big part of your development process? Like you were exploring those ideas and it was sprawling, and you were like, what was your relationship with the community in the whole development process?
We knew early on, and because this is, I can't even remember the dates exactly, but COVID was involved, and so being online was very useful. It allowed us to keep testing, but also crucially, it allowed us to iterate very quickly. We could just be like, hey, we've got this idea for the system or these cards. Why don't we just explore it very quickly? And we don't need to print out a bunch of stuff. And then obviously what's important is that you then print that out and you hold on to that idea. I think if you're just working digitally, you can move too quickly and things kind of get kind of messy. So I think it's a good balance. I think that's what's great about board games. It's this idea that you can hold it and on the table and all these things. And so, yeah, we started developing a community naturally, first with people that we knew. And then, I guess we were posting online and people started to see about the game or maybe at conventions. And it started to grow and grow. And then it really ballooned around the time of the Kickstarter, where we had this pretty far along prototype, even though the final game is really quite different in many. It's not different, but it's just had a lot more work put into it. But building this community was absolutely integral because it allowed us to balance four factions, which was a totally horrible.
Yes, it's awful. Yeah, especially you have to think about the different matchup at different player counts. I don't know what you did this to yourself. Like
I didn't know. I didn't. I was naive.
Yeah, you were naive.
I did not know, and it was very useful to start to see players' reactions and to start to learn about how to manage players who are playing the game, because it's so useful, the amount of data you get, but you're also bombarded with opinions and counter opinions, and players start to get very good at the game, so it starts to warp how you are balancing the game or how you're even communicating the game, because you're surrounded by players who get really good at the game. So all that was a fascinating experience, and in particular when the Kickstarter was running, it was an influx of new people, and that was terrifying. We had this small community that was really friendly and really lovely, and a lot of people came in. And it's not that they weren't lovely, but it was an incredible kind of cacophony of people. And also the game itself got really bashed at that point, because there were some people who came in who we had just a tiny tangent, but had this experience where there was a couple of people who came in and they were like mean, but in a nice way, kind of, but they were really shaking the rules and the rule book and the intentions of things. And sometimes it just didn't hold together. The system just didn't. It was like, oh yeah, no, that wording doesn't work on a small scale, or even that system is kind of a bit wobbly. And so it's quite stressful and quite horrible. And some of those people came back after, like, recently, as the game was launching, and they kind of stress tested it again, but the game just held up this time. And so in a way, because of them, so it's very useful, but absolutely took years off my life. Like it's horrible. It's really fun. And it's great. It's great building this community, but it's a lot of effort. I've had a bunch of people approach us about the game, because the game's kind of doing well, and asking how do you do certain parts of the project. And one of them that they ask is, how do you build this community? And you just have to be patient and just work on it all the time. And and hope that nice people join, which in our case they did, and then it starts to flourish so long as it's nurtured. But it just takes time, and you can't really cheat your way into it.
And I completely feel your what you're talking about, the pain as a first time designer of receiving hard and sometimes fair feedback, but still like
Mhm.
worded in a way where you feel like it's even like altering your sense of are you legitimate to even make a game, and
Oh
is
yeah,
this all a mistake, and you're starting to think about it at night, and it's hard at the beginning to separate the fact that it's just a feedback and it's just a like if the feedback is qualitative, what is important is to understand what is useful in your feedback and what you can do with it, and not take it as something that should shatter your own confidence in yourself. I think that's a very hard process, and I would expect that in your situation with that massive influx of people in a community, that must have been quite hard actually to manage on on a personal level, because it's also people like challenging your design in a very public way, so
very
that must,
public.
yeah, very,
Yeah.
that must be really rough. So how did you manage getting beyond that and realizing, okay, I can still do this, and in the end that's going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's I was used to some like coming from an art background and working in like big teams with art directors and things like that. You know, sometimes they would just say, "This is rubbish." Criticism can be quite blunt and direct. So I'm used to working in an environment where that can happen. I think what was harder was that we weren't game designers. We were just learning how to be game designers.
Mm.
We are still learning how to be game designers. And so that was rough because that did rattle what we were trying to do. And the art in the game actually in some ways hurt that more because we could cheat our way into, people being excited about the game, but so many people were just like, is there even a game behind this thing, when it was the game first and then the art that came. But I think that it meant that we did get this larger than normal influx of people experiencing the game or being interested in the game, and that made it very public and quite scary. But I will say that our experience with leader games did definitely help with that as well, because we'd reached out to them
Yeah.
before the Kickstarter had happened, and we had been in contact with them a bunch of times, and that had meant that the design had been going back and forwards with some of them, Cole and Nick as well, a little bit less, but Cole mainly. Um, It'd been going backwards and forwards with them. So we had also had the design stress tested that way. It just that was much more private, and it was between people that were kind of there was like consent. Like, there's consent to get shouted at. Um, not the Cole shouting at me, but it was like an agreement, around feedback. Whereas in a public forum,
Yeah.
semi-public forum. And it's why I still struggle with it now. I still, Board Game Geek is like a really frightening place for somebody who's like, a really small company, and you know, often my role in the game gets put front and center, like, oh, the designer and the illustrator. But
Mm.
it also means that it really hurts when somebody is like
Yeah.
particularly cruel, especially because it took so many years of my life.
And
So I shouldn't, of course I shouldn't. It's so stupid.
yeah, but it's
It
normal.
does.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
what you were saying about the fact that you're used to take criticism when it comes to your art because it was your job, but not used to it when it comes to game design because you were learning as you go. It's normal. And like I was seeing the campaign and its success, and on one hand, I was looking at it and was like, I'm so happy that it's doing so well, but at the same time, I was feeling for you because I was like those getting that much influx of feedback in a on a Discord server and everything from people you don't know necessarily can be really rough. And I know that for myself it has been hard, and it was at a way smaller scale because it was GMT, was a small historical game, but still it did hurt. And I did develop that habit of having first phase of playtest only with people I knew, like the relationship that you
Mm,
created with Cole. This is something that I created quite early for me, where I was like, okay, I have game ideas, I want to test them, but I'm going to test them with people who are going to be very rough to me. They're going to tell me
mm,
as it is. but I know them, I trust them, I go to them for that, and we have that level of trust, and I can get the punches from them, and that's fine. And I'm gonna, and then once I'm comfortable with that, then I'm gonna share it a bit more publicly. But I had to shield myself because it can be really rough, and you need this space where you can experiment, and you need to be able to be comfortable to fail, and it's sometimes hard to fail in public. And I think that's really interesting that you went through that also. I'm happy that it ended up working so well.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
wanted to go back into the what you were saying about the art. I think a lot of people didn't realize that it was a small company that you just created, that it was your first game, because the art was so fucking amazing. And I think that's probably did help, and at the same time also had its drawbacks. And I wanted to understand better your relationship between the art and the game. So you started, you said, with the game, and then you developed this lore, and it feels like through making art you actually developed your own lore. But I was wondering how those two interconnected in your design process, at the same time doing the art and developing the game.
It was absolutely a game before anything else, and for a long time was abstract. We always knew that with so many projects, there's some point where either there's enough momentum or it's just sparking enough that you're like, this is something that we're going to try and work on, more formally. This doesn't need to, I'm not just talking about games, just anything, but anything sort of creative, I would say. It reaches the threshold and it starts coming alive. But the actual process of even the art style, I mean, it took many, many, many months, which doesn't sound that long in the long scheme of a game, but like if this was a game that was being published by a big publisher, we couldn't speculate on like different approaches. I was like painting some of the illustrations. There was like we were going to do. So there was going to be more detailed. At one point, we almost went down this avenue where like every card took like 40 hours to do, which we had to still be drawing it at this point. And we reined that in. And then once we had the look of it, just a couple of cards, like these grips in the wall, then I could start to allow ideas to percolate around tone and around feel and atmosphere, and you know, um, we started to realize that we really didn't want a game about um, there aren't like many weapons in the game, for example, and there isn't much in the way of like purely martial characters, but rather it's more about the people of these factions, and how the individual parts of those factions would come together to create a whole that might be broadly militaristic or whatever, or engaging in these conflicts. And the conflicts themselves aren't really conflicts as such. They're kind of there's a lot of ambiguity around what fights are in this game. It's not always just people with swords. That's what I'm trying to say. And so that was helpful because you start to establish a tone, and then faction identity, and how factions played started to inform it in some ways. Never really the other way though. It's not like I would draw something and then that would change what
Yeah.
it was. That wouldn't really happen. I don't think that would be a very good way of doing it. Maybe it would, but I think some tonal stuff probably made it into the game mechanics that was a response to the artwork, especially in later stages developments, where you're really finessing what it is that a faction is trying to say. Like I use this example sometimes, but there's the Uprising and this faction. All factions have a war machine. It's one of their cards. It's 5 strength, and it can deploy on the map. And they have a war machine as well. But their war machine is a professor at a blackboard showing a bunch of schematics of different what could be war machines. And the Uprising are kind of like based on like protest movements, and the tension between when a political movement or protest movement, how does violence feature in that? Because they can be quite a destructive faction, but they're also they want to kind of avoid conflict as well. Their war machine is not some weapon, but it's the idea of weapons being used, and then it has a kind of like a kind of little line, a flavor text that says I hope these will never have to be deployed, or something like that. And there's a kind of temporal thing going on there, which is you're playing the game, and this is your war machine, which means implicit in that is that they did have to make these weapons of war at some point, and they're having to use them in this conflict that is happening. So there was a lot of stuff like that where, with the extra time that we had, you could take an idea like war machines, and you could start to think about how they might be presented more interestingly, and how they might communicate aspects of the faction that, if you were under more time pressure, or just weren't thinking about it in the same way, you might just draw a big gun. one of the
Yeah,
machines is a big gun, but that's deliberately that for that faction, and a big kind of bombard thing. But
and
that's yeah.
it's interesting that you start talking about some of the influence that you had behind different factions, and maybe that's something that I would be curious to hear you talk about. Where did you get inspiration from the different factions? Are there archetypes of political movements, or are there mostly mechanical ideas? How did you came up with those different factions? How you want to make them work? What influenced you to make them the way they do?
So I think one of the great things about storytelling and art is ambiguity, and places cracks in between ideas, or things being presented to the audience. In those cracks where their imagination can take root and can thrive. So I'm not very interested in sort of adding like dates or a name to the kingdom, and while the characters are named, that's more of a like tonal thing, because you can express a character's name with this little text box. Also makes them memorable so people can communicate them. So it has a kind of gameplay implication there. I like ambiguity, and I like the idea that people can interpret things differently. The game opens with the premise that the Old King's death, or not death, or disappearance, or he's abdicated, like that isn't clear or precise. Rather, each part of the kingdom has a different idea. If you're aligned with the monarchy, he died peacefully in his sleep, and everyone around him loved him. But if there's people who resist the monarchy, and they think he was a tyrant, and that he died a kind of miserable end. The ambiguity also stretched to the factions. I wanted these broad kind of canvas things to explore. So the nobility are nobles, but they're also about the idea of political and social ossification. They just have slowed down so much that they are covered in stone, for example. There's lots of a lot of their motifs are around ruined, opulent stone structures. Some of the armor is so it's clothes as stone structures. They've got these really ornate, almost impossible costumes that just are not practical in any way at all, and speak to just wealth and abundance over anything else. Whereas the uprising we were talking about earlier, I was, as part of their aesthetics is drawn from like the Scarlet Pimpernel, but I was also interested in the miners' strikes in across the UK, or the suffrage movement, that tension, for example, between suffragettes and suffragists. I definitely was interested in that, and that's kind of at the core of that faction, and just using those ideas that are sometimes mechanical, because we might have some system that we wanted to explore the faction, but then and then ideas that are real or historical, but then also abstract ideas. Like the Gathering, I was really interested in the idea of a cult of personality, and just how that might be expressed in this weird world, and how fetishizing one person or one idea, how that can twist things, and that line between love and an obsession. That was when I had that made it easier to draw these things and to kind of think of them that way.
And
Yeah.
you've put so much in the art, in creating those names, those characters. Did at any point you have appetite to explore this a bit more and maybe have like work on the lore, having a all King Crown RPG system or something like this? Is it something that crossed your mind or?
I don't know. Uh, Financially, maybe. No, I mean, of course, it would be. I love spending time in this thing, and what an incredible privilege to be able to like root around in your own head and make something, and to have other people come along and join you in this world you're making. It's such a rare privilege, and I say that as somebody who already had the privilege of working as an illustrator for a living, which is a very lucky profession. But also, you know, when you're working on those big projects in animation or in, you know, video games, in my experience, you know, you're sometimes working on things that you don't have that much affection for, or that the part that you're working on makes such a small like portion of the whole that you know you're not really affecting it. So yes, I love spending time on it and being in that world and adding to that world. But what I don't want to do so much, or what doesn't interest me, is formalizing the world too much.
Mm, keeping the
Um,
ambiguity.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the playfulness of it. For example, the Uprising, they they there's part of them that represents the kind of an existential crisis, which is if the kingdom has been a monarchy for so long, what happens when and old for so long? What happens when the future comes? You know, something as sweeping as an industrial revolution. So in some ways, the Uprising are like they bring with them a different time period. Um, there's a module in the expansion which is the legendary creatures, and you know one of them is like a big like crow. Another one's a bear. What's the other one? Oh, a moth for the gathering, and then the uprising one's a train, right? Which you know, my favorite animal, everyone's
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
animal, the
It's
train.
it's it's the
And
best animal. That's true.
yeah, and I remember some people got like kind of mad at us because we were putting a train as one of the animals, because they kind of wanted like a big, you know, a big fox or
Yeah, yeah.
something that would represent. But the other factions can have these magical creatures.
Mm,
But what I wanted the magical power or whatever of the uprising would be that they represent like irresistible progress,
progress.
the march
Yeah,
forward. Yeah, and that's what's special to them. They don't have like a magic animal that helps them.
yeah.
Um, but it's funny. Just a big train on the map.
I think it's
Um,
awesome, and I think it says something interesting. But yeah, so people got upset, which leads me to the
mm,
next question. So now the game has been out. I was saying that yeah, there were quite a few big YouTube channels that made content on your game. They were very positive, and I wanted to know how this made you feel, like the overall reception so far. How has it been for you?
it's been incredible. Just an enormous amount of relief and pride in what the team made. You know, I certainly couldn't have done this alone. No way. And so I'm just really proud that it came together in the way that it did. Now, it doesn't mean that it's for everyone. And some people's responses are like, it's a game that makes some people very angry, or at least frustrated with the game, or they just, some people just, they just, I guess there's something in the systems, especially around the lack of information. I think there's lots of information in the game, and the game is about peering into the fog of war or clearing the fog of war. But for some players, it just is not, it's not their thing, and that's totally fine. Although sometimes their responses are pretty mean. But I'm very happy that people have responded the way they have, and surprised. I think there's more people like it than I maybe anticipated. Because it is a big weird game, and I'd really lost sight of what people would think of it. So it was relief. There was a huge amount of relief. There was this horrible period where the game was like done, but manufacturing takes a long time, and even when it wasn't quite done, we were doing final tweaks, and then we were doing translation and things like that. There's this horrible period where the game's finished, but we still had a ways to go before it was actually coming out, and trying to get across that leap and trying to express that the game had gone through changes and had really like seen years of extra work put into it was tough. And sometimes we'd get like a review based on the old version of the game, and it really hurt, because all I wanted to do was I'm just happy that the game is out there advocating for itself, whether good or bad. It's just out there now speaking for itself. That's a huge relief.
Honestly, I'm not surprised that it did well and got good reception, because I feel like the hobby is at a point where people embrace weird, like they are not expecting not everyone is expecting the same thing. Like it's not, you have a very definite crowd of German cube games that need to be perfect information, very procedural, and then you've got the people who are really just, I want dudes on a map and chucking a lot of dice. I think there is a lot of more space now for weird, and I feel like your game is a very good example of that. Like it has a classical core and it adds a lot of weird stuff on top, and then you actually develop your own universe. And I'm just super happy that it got the reception that it had, and I think it's really deserved. But I'm wondering, now that this is done, I'm expecting, so you've learned how to make games now. Now you are a game designer. Yeah,
I learned how
now
to make one.
you made one. It was a big one, but you made it. Now that one has been released, you are officially a game designer. So what's coming up next? What's your next project?
There's an expansion coming for this thing. That was, we basically rolled straight into working on the expansion. And for this, we've been working like for 8 months or whatever. That's going really well. It's really exciting. It's like very surreal to be revisiting the world, but with that paradigm, all mussed up, because now you're not playing with the same factions. So there's lots of exciting stuff in that expansion. A lot of stuff that we haven't announced yet that is in the expansion that we've been working on. We will announce at some point. Then we have a number of other games, and some of these have been worked on for ages. Some of them for years. There's two in particular. We as a company, and myself as a designer, I think we know what our next big game will be, in the future, and that is in a working state and has been for a while. And then we also have a smaller game that we've been working on that is almost, it's not as old as the Old King's Crown, but we have been working on it for years, and it's like a fan favorite here in the studio. Like it's a game that we've just played in different iterations for a very long time. And for both of these projects, we'd obviously love to bring them to life. As a publisher and a first-time publisher, it does mean balancing things, and we obviously are focused on the expansion for the Old King's Crown, but we would love to bring these things to life, and we maybe have ways to do that, and that's exciting. So yeah, I can't say anything.
Yes.
I've got like
You're talking like a company man, Pablo.
Yeah,
It's
they've got like guns pointed at me right now, and they're just going.
just shut the fuck up. Tell them no one is gonna watch that video. That's fine. I have a very tiny audience, so you can say whatever you want here. But yeah, super excited to see what's coming up. I think it makes sense to capitalize on the success of this one and having the expansion and establishing you, I guess, as a publisher too, and before going into something new. But I must say, I'm really excited to see what's going to come up next. I think it would be really interesting, especially based on the offline discussion we had. I'm curious to have your naivete coming into different areas and shake things up. I think that's going to be quite interesting to see. Just beyond that, more on a business level, you started as being two friends working on this, and then there was the success of the campaign, and you end up building a game design studio. So what is Eerie Idol now? What does it look like, and how did it change the way you're working on games?
So we have a little studio that we rent. It's like a one room, and we share it with Judson Cowan, who's the designer of Deep Regrets and other such upcoming titles. So we work here and like 9 to 5, although none of us really work 9 to 5. We take it all home afterwards, and my flat is just it's just desks everywhere. We work on that, and there's 3 of us who work for the company, like as full-time employees, and then we sometimes work with contractors and things like that. So, for example, we don't handle the logistics of the game. We like make deals, and we have interviews and discussions with people, but for example, the fulfillment of the game has not been done by us. It's been done by a fulfillment company, because you wouldn't want me anywhere near your logistics decisions. they would never just never arrive. We never get on the boat. So yeah. I mean, and all of this has been a new experience as well. And again, because it took ages, it was very useful to learn about these things bit by bit. I will say that again, Cole and actually Drew as well,
Yeah.
from Whirligig, we had some discussions with them that were absolutely like fundamental and pivotal to how we were able to kind of operate as a company. Just these kind of North Star guiding ideas that really helped. So they were involved with the game design and helping us with that. But those kind of conversations were amazing. And in general, people in the industry have been very, very, very helpful. But navigating a lot of this stuff has just been learning as we go, and always asking people who know more to help us, help us, please.
And I think it says something also about the industry. I feel like there are, especially in the independent part of the hobby, some people who are very keen on helping each other,
Mm,
supporting each other, and I think Cole is a really good example of that. Like
mm,
he's very supportive
mhm,
of different initiatives. I mean, even as a content creator, like he's been always available to come on the show
mm,
to discuss about stuff that like can be sometimes a bit sensitive, like for example the having the discussion about the historical and philosophical background of the factions in Root and everything at a
mhm,
moment where some of it was a bit contentious. And him and Drew is providing a lot of time to the hobby, like even participating into some awards and stuff like this, stuff that people don't necessarily see. But I feel like it's really interesting. So what was your perspective overall? Did you feel like the industry was really welcoming, even beyond those two nice characters, I would say?
yeah. Like lots of nice people in the video game industry, but it feels like a very different industry in some ways. Maybe not. Maybe it's not fair, but at least in our experience, there have been many people who have been incredibly kind and generous with their time and their experience. Even like I was in Malaga doing a talk. Uh, like we got it was as part of the San Diego Comic Con Malaga, and so I was on a panel with someone from Devere and the designers of White Castle, and even there, like people just very nice, very supportive, very kind with their time and their input, um, and yourself and Liz Davidson, Ricky Royal. Yeah, it's just an abundance of people who've just been extremely kind. I think it's probably because there is something of the cottage industry in it, um, because it's relatively few people, relatively both making the things and purchasing the things, and it has this that can sometimes be dangerous, but it's often very good. That there is a melding of of it's hard to tell where the hobby and the industry stop sometimes.
Yeah.
How they subdivide. You just have a lot of people who are just impossibly nerdy people. They're just wretchedly geeky, and and they love this
I
stuff.
feel
And
seen. Yeah.
yeah, and they 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 live and breathe it. You know, kind of whether they want to or not, and so that blends into a lot of the business decisions. We've definitely had some like nastier um, business experiences for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but overall, but like any industry, but overall, extremely kind and a lot of lifting people up, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, at least in our experience.
Well, thanks for walking us through all of this, Pablo. It was awesome
No,
to
my
have this
pleasure.
chat. I'm really eager to see what's going to come up next. So please, as soon as you're ready to talk and people allow you to say stuff, I would be happy to have you on the show. We could do a demo, stuff like this. I think it would be really fun. One thing
Yes.
I think we need to do. I think we
Yeah.
need to organize a game of Condottiere, like a
Oh
live
yeah.
game. Yeah, I can bring in Joe is also Joe Dewhurst is also a big Condottiere enthusiast, so we could have him
Okay.
on. Like like making like finding some really a good bunch of Condottiere players and having you discover
Throw
this
me into the wolves. Yeah.
this magical game that you need to discover, and hopefully you're gonna get trashed, or maybe not, because at least when Joe and I are in the same game, we spend more time trying to fuck each
That's it. If
other
you if
than
you eat each other, then
yeah, we're gonna
maybe I'll
focus on that.
skink.
So you can probably slide and find a
Yeah,
path to
yeah.
victory, but you need to play Condottiere, and I would really like to have you on the show to actually learn and discover the game with us. I think
I'd
it's a
love to do
classic
that.
for a reason,
That sounds
and I think
great.
it would be really fun to play it with you,
Yeah.
and also having you reflect in real time on how some ideas actually made you think about your own design. I think that would be really really funny.
I'm
But
I'll probably have
it's
an existential crisis. I'll just be like, this is so fucking good. This is good.
they are very different games, so that's
Okay.
fine, but there
Okay.
are some
Okay.
definitely conceptually I can see some clear connections, and I think that's quite interesting, but in a way that yours is a bit more sprawly, it has more, but there are some things in there where you look at it, it's like if you squint a bit, it's like I can see a bit of Condottiere in there, and I think it's fun, and I would like you to
Okay.
see it. So I think that would be great, but I'll keep you posted on that. In the meantime, congratulations again for your great success. Let us know when the expansion is getting released, and yeah, and good luck for the future. And
Thank
thanks for
you.
taking the time.
All the best. Thank you.
Bye.